colonists want the British troops to stay. And the assumption is that if you keep 10,000 British troops, they built about 25,000 at the height of the war. If you keep 10,000 in North America, all of them stationed very far away from any British North American settlements. They're all in the Appalachian Mountains. They're all in Western Pennsylvania. What's interesting is that after the Stamp Act riots, and then after the boycott movement and things begin to escalate in 1766, 67, 68, the British begin to become less and less concerned about policing the frontier. Thousands of those troops are moved eastward into colonial cities, and they're moved into the hottest spots, New York and particularly Boston. Now, this leads to real concern and anger about the presence of military personnel in the presence of civilians and being used to presumably silence them, intimidate them, or violate their liberties. But again, what I want to suggest is that it's not inevitable that colonial Americans will hate the British military. It's not inevitable that they will feel the British military is a threatening force of oppression. What it is that we have to tell a complicated story of how and why they came to experience the military. During the 7 Years' War, they really revered the military. They're paying for the cost of the military. They're paying to quarter troops. They work side by side with British officers and men. There's a real sense of camaraderie, particularly between American colonial officers and British officers. In 1763, they want 10,000 troops to remain in colonial North America. They're willing to quarter them. But it is the case that by the time you're now moving them into, say, Boston in 1768 and 69, and they're there to try and prevent people from resisting the Townsend Acts or denouncing the dissolution of the British military, what had been a revered institution that was seen as an instrument of British power and liberty against the true threat to liberty. And around that, you begin to get real concerns about the idea of standing armies, about the idea of the presence of the military in civilian populations. Even that, I don't think was inevitable. But increasingly, that seems to be a better way to understand things because of the actual events between 1763 and 1761. So this becomes a real powder keg. And there's real hatreds by 1769 70 among the Boston population and the British military. It's also the case that the Boston economy isn't doing that well. And a lot of British military off-duty move and work in civilian occupations. And they can undercut Boston laborers because they're getting paid as British military personnel as well. So they can earn less money from their off-duty jobs. There's lots of tensions between colonial Boston dock workers, Boston laborers, the British military, and this really builds to a head in the winter of 1770. In December 5th of 1770, leads to a confrontation conflict where a large crowd of Bostonians surrounds a small contingent of the British military. And in this confusing mess and rioting, someone seems to shout fire, or the British hear them shouting fire, and several troops fire into the crowd, killing 5 Bostonians and 6 Bostonians, including a boy and 3 black men. And so this leads to a sense that something has happened that hadn't happened before, which is that British subjects of the king in his army have fired on other British subjects of the king, citizens of Boston, who believe themselves to be equally British and equally loyal. And now they have to question whether France and the Catholic menace is really the biggest threat to their liberties, or whether it's their own crown and their own army. I wouldn't say that's a point of no return, but I think there's a point of no return that comes later. But that's part of why the Townsend Acts crisis, I would argue, is a severe escalation of the conflict and the tension over with the standpoint.